Just by a real brief way of introduction, my name's Boorman. I would tell you what my job is, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm kind of one of these, I suppose, citizens of the new economies. I do four things really, which has taken me a while to figure out. I work with technology companies in the HR space, particularly recruiting and talent acquisition, as a lead advisor. So I help put together advisory boards, do a lot of work on product, and do a lot of marketing and representing that business, and help them really to try and understand a little bit more about the way in which you get users for your products in the market. So I do quite a bit of that. I also run an event which is True Recruiting Unconferences. We had 100 events last year in 65 countries. So I talk to somewhere around about 2,500 people in the market space. I have a big belief that what's wrong with the current crop of events is A, they're extremely boring. I've heard myself before, so I'm kind of bored of my stick and presentation. I don't like PowerPoint or anything like that. I think B, one of the big issues you get with events is they operate what I'd call occupational apartheid. So they'll go, right, if you have to be a practitioner to attend, and even just using the term vendor creates a gladiatorial situation in an event. So as soon as you describe someone as a vendor, and you have a vendor hall, and you describe someone else as a practitioner, you've created that situation of selling, and nobody wants to be sold to. And it's one of my fundamental beliefs is everybody wants to buy, nobody wants to be sold to. So the old-fashioned model of selling is just that. It's kind of becoming quite dated. So I work with companies kind of trying to figure that out. I run the events talking to people of everything from, and I'll talk to anyone from kind of job boards, job seekers, I do the candidate experience and all this kind of stuff to generate thinking, and I produce content and white papers, and some people seem to think they're all right and read that stuff, which still amazes me, but some people like that stuff. I used to be a recruiter, right? So that everything that I think about comes from a point of view of how do we get people hired in organisations. Twice a year I'll do an implementation job with a global corporation. So my track record over the last 3 years is we set up the methodology and bought all of the technology, which was 90% startup technology on the projects that I work with, for Oracle globally. So the Oracle's responsible, 40% of their hiring is through social media, through their Facebook page. 30% is through referral, and 30% is through traditional headhunting. And I work on technology, how people work in the business, brand advocacy, and all this kind of fancy stuff. And usually it's something quite different. People don't bring me in because they want to carry on doing the same thing, which is not a surprise. So really, what I wanted to talk about and answer your questions is advisors, because when you're in startup mode, you're going to get hit by a lot of people who would appear to be a good proposition as an advisor, right? And you're going to get a lot of people who look like they would be a great name to put over your door, for which you're going to be asked to part with something. My advice to you is not to part with any equity for an advisor. Always part with options, because it gives them skin in the game. That's number one, is make it an option deal, not an equity deal. Because equity, you're giving away your business. Options, you're giving away a value in the future of the business, which means you're actually, from an advisory point of view, what you're actually you're doing is giving me skin in the game. You're making me, the only way I'm going to ultimately earn out of your business is if I make you a good business, right? So option, and that's through options. So, and you can put conditions in terms of when they're going to be realised when you appreciate it as a business. So I think when you start off, the first thing you've got to decide is actually what do we want advisors to do? What don't we have capability? And I'd normally look at an advisory board somewhere between 6 and 10 people is about the right number. But you never actually get those 10 people in a room together. So each of those people have an individual job at which they are very good in the market space at the moment. So that might be somebody from a marketing background, that might be someone who's maybe built a product before. I would say at this moment in time, you definitely want someone with a level of expertise in mobility. And I use the term mobility. I think the mobile technical piece is quite easy. I think what that actually means in how people are using, what that actually means in how people will use your products is a whole different thing. So someone with some expertise, I think you definitely need some people who work in the coalface at the front end, people who are going to be the typical users of your product to help you understand what your product should be. And you definitely need a data person. You need someone who understands data, and in particular someone in the recruiting space who understands data that isn't on LinkedIn. Because one of the big trends we're finding at the moment is being written into all of the contracts is if you are dependent on LinkedIn data, the contract can be cancelled at any point should LinkedIn choose to turn off their API, which they will do if they decide you're a competitor. And they kind of have a theory that there's the world and LinkedIn and everyone else competes, right? So I think you have to look at it and say, what is actually going to complement us, and bring in advisors that you can use at certain times. So collectively, there'll be people you go to. You also want to look to, the best place to find good advisors is in the bar after conferences, because they're the people who don't like conferences but like spending time with people, because that's generally the people who know what's going on. So if you go to any of the events like HR Tech or any of the meetups, any of that stuff, it's who actually genuinely, from an advisor, I'm looking for people who genuinely just talk to people about this stuff all the time. They're just passionate about it, right? Because you've got to have someone on board who genuinely sells the same passion, has the same passion as you in what you're doing. Genuinely who's going to go out there. So what's our passions? What do I look for in advisors? Actually, it's dead simple. I'm looking for people who really want to make recruiting better. Don't care what for. Not too worried about whether they want to increase shareholder value or do any of that good stuff, because there's a million people I can pay to come and do that. Who actually wants to make, who's actually a bit passionate about fixing a problem in the market, and there's tons of them. Forget about recruiting being broken. Who actually wants to make it easier for people to get jobs and employers to connect? Do you really want to do that? And do you really get it? Do you really understand? I like people who don't talk to me about best practice. Very bored about that. Best practice means I'm copying someone, right? Someone's done it before. I'm interested in people who like to do, people who do test practice, people who will, whenever I talk with a new customer, they'll go, what are we going to do? And they say, we're going to do loads of stuff. And they'll say, well, what stuff? And you say, I don't really know. I would advise you as technology businesses to not set yourselves up as a technology business. I think you've got to set yourself up as a solution provider with technology that facilitates that, right? Technology that comes in, but you need to be thinking about the problems you're trying to solve. That's the bit you need to understand. There's something else really important that you've got to get from the advisors that you work with, is you've got to make sure they appreciate the brilliant naivety of a startup. Because a startup will come and say, someone who's never done something before will come and say, why don't we do this? And very often you'll talk to some people in the industry and they'll turn around and say, oh yeah, but Bounty Jobs did that and that failed. You go, right, so everyone else is going to do that. So you need someone who appreciates a bit of naivety in that some of the things you're going to do as a startup, we need to allow you to go through some pain points, because sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes the best lesson you're going to have is it's going to punch you in the face in a few weeks' time, right? And it's better not to tell you that. The other thing you need to have from an advisor is someone who knows who the wolves are, right? Because there's tons of them circling on you already. The fact that you've put yourself up as a startup and maybe raised some money means there's lots of wolves circling who are seeing an opportunity to make some quick cash quite readily. So you want to have somebody who's been around a bit and knows who a few people are, who knows who are the people you trust and who are the people you work with, who are the people you talk to. You also want to think a little bit differently. So one of the other bits of advice I would give you, George spoke about it this morning, is all of the new customers that we take on, we ask them to sign a disclosure agreement, right, which kind of messes their world. So they're going, anyone that I work with, I sign a disclosure agreement, which means I'm going to talk about the work I'm doing in a very, very public way, because you want me to do that. That's what you pay me for. Advisors are not stupid. They're not going to share your secrets. What you think is your competitive advantage probably isn't, because they're probably, the worst conversations I have is when someone comes to me with a new idea, because I know roughly I'm going to be pissing on their bonfire fairly quickly. I'm going to be looking at it and saying, this unique idea you've got, here's 10 people who already do it, and then, I don't know that many people. I look at about 40 products a week, but you know, there's a million people fixing HR and recruiting out there, all generally agreed that it's broken, and they have the solution. So there's a lot of snake oil selling. So we also have a lot of time of trying to understand that. The other thing is understanding what do you want to be as a product? Where are you going to go? So the first question I'd ask people as an advisor is, are you trying to be a platform or a product? Because that's the first question. And most people at the moment are talking to me about trying to be a platform. And I don't understand that, because, okay, you might do it, but you're unlikely to be Facebook, LinkedIn or Twitter. You're unlikely. The people who we're trying to attract or sift, the data we're trying to work for, that's already there. Those communities already exist, right? They're already doing a good job. What we've got to do is say, are we actually providing something which adds to the ecosystem, that makes stuff better? How do we decide who we connect with and who we talk to about? Do we actually go out prospecting, looking for customers, or do we look for contacts and conversation? For me, business is all about conversations. You look for conversations, and you don't go looking for the value. I hate things like going to people who go to an event and they have a list of all the attendees and they're looking at who's got the value. And if you come to one of my events, nobody has a name badge. I'm really, really fussy about that. I hate name badges at events. And I hate name badges at events because I hate people coming and deciding, are you a vendor or not? You're going to try and sell me something. Should I talk to you? Have you got something to add to the conversation?
You don't like people staring at your chest.
Oh, I don't mind. People can stare at me all they like. It's all branded. That's the other thing. You want an advisor who wears your clothes. That's kind of important as well. Just keep giving them free stuff. They like it a lot. So you want it. So, and you want people who are just going to and you could see a lot from your advisors about the behaviours of people when you go to events. So I know that when I go to an HR tech event or something like that, I can see the people who are sitting in corners having conversation, then standing up and doing their stick, and then going away. And I can see the people who are genuinely talking and got a passion. And the people I want to work with, and you should want to have working in your business, have a genuine passion for what they're doing. I also would say, when you're looking for an advisor, don't pay them a commission for sales. Don't put in a commission deal if you sell as customers. That's kind of old economy. You want someone to sell your product and recommend your product to solution providers because they believe in the product they've built, because they've told you how to build it. So why wouldn't they believe that's the best? That's what I do. I go out and say, right, if I'm working with Oracle or the BBC or anyone else, I'd start off straight away and say, disclosure, these are the companies I work with. These are the companies I work with. I don't earn any more money if you buy their product, or they don't. We have the same kind of deal. But what I can tell you is I've helped with the product roadmap, so why wouldn't I think it's the right product? So if you believe in what I'm doing, and that's one of the things you want to think about once you start looking for how can we start working with influencers, how can we give people commission scales, earnings, kind of, you get us some clients, we'll pay you 5% or 10% of the deal or whatever it is. Then you've got people selling your product because they want to get their 10% rather than selling your product because it fits a problem. That might get you some short-term gains. It won't work for you in the long term. So I think from your advisors, you've got to look at people who are, the approach that they're taking is genuinely diagnostic. The other thing you want to look at for your advisors is using them in your sales funnel at a certain point, because they'll have some value in terms of what they can do. So advisors should be generating you things like white papers, so that 91% of people cannot believe them or whatever it is. But your advisors want to generate you white papers, do things like webinars, and go on client calls and talk to customers. Talk to customers from a diagnostic point of view, not a sales point of view. Talking to them about, right, let's talk about what it is you're doing and where are you going. And these are the things you want to talk about when you look, identifying your advisors. Talk to them about where are they actually going to do something for you, and when they do something, because who you have as advisors also has a big value with investors. Investors like that kind of stuff. The fact that the people who've trusted you and put a bit of effort into it. And the research that they're doing to produce content should become your product roadmap, because the two things should kind of fit together. I've talked for ages now, so I'm really bored of me. So what questions have you got, and what do you want to ask about?
When I've always thought about advisors, you always think about the advisory board, right?
Yeah.
But really, your advisor is not necessarily a board. It really is a bunch of individual people who can help provide value.
At times, yeah. So our advisors will have value at different times, and sometimes that value will not be clear because you won't have a requirement for them, right? So if you've got a guy who's real good at mobile and you're not doing anything mobile at the moment, you may not need any of his time for 3 or 4 months. But in 3 or 4 months' time, you do need him. What's important is you have a means of communication of just keeping everybody up to date with what you're doing on product. This is where we're at. This is what we're talking about. You know, when you've got that chain, just shout out towards us. I interrupted you, so you can interrupt me. It's cool.
All right. There's a branding benefit too.
Yeah.
If you're picking the right advisors with a background, names that are recognizable within a niche or in the overall market, you might not be utilizing that mobile expert, but when customers see them on your site, if they're thinking mobile, there's an advantage you're getting just from having that.
Just having the right person there who has the solution. But also sometimes being able to call that advisor in to advise the customer on a specific problem which has nothing to do with selling your product. But you're giving them a gateway to say, go. So one of the role points, one of the businesses I advise, and where I fit in the chain is I talk to customers between the sales kind of been agreed but not signed off, and then I do 1 and 2 hour consultancy calls with the clients, and we have about 100% conversion rate off that. And I will talk to them about anything they want to know about social media or branding, or how do we actually, because what most people will buy from you, what most people want to know is how are you actually going to deploy this technology in the business? How are you going to make it work once it's in? Dead easy to go buy tech. That's quite easy. How are you going to? If we put in a referral technology, if we put in a matching technology, how are we going to get recruiters to use it, and how's it going to add value? How are we going to get people to sign up for it or go do it or make video or do any of that stuff? That's what they want to talk about, because that's what they really, you have to think about it. From a sales point of view, there's a business strong box. The business strong box consists of 4 parts. The first one is capability. So if I'm looking for something, I will want to go and look at the businesses who are capable of providing me with that solution. That's the first one. And I usually already know who they are because I've read their stuff or seen their things. The other thing a bit of advice I'd give you with that is the best thing I've done with the businesses that I've worked with is hire a videographer as one of the first employees. Because we have videographers to create video stories, and video stories is all of the customers we start making video from day one. Why have they come to us as a business? Where have they gone? What are they doing? What pain points? And we want them to talk about the things that didn't work, because that makes transparent content. We went out to do this and it didn't work. We don't want them saying we're great, because you kind of expect that.
You mentioned a disclosure agreement. I've never heard
Yeah.
of it.
Well, people ask you to sign a non-disclosure, right?
Yeah.
So particularly when you're an advisor, they'll say, will you sign an NDA?
You probably would say no.
I asked, if they want me to sign a non-disclosure agreement, I'm probably the wrong person for them to be working with. It is my view. It's this
We've had it with people like yourself in this
disclosure
sector,
agreement.
looking at products
No,
every day.
there's 2 things. Number one is you have to trust your advisors as employees, right? You have to trust them with the same degree of trust, because you need to be able to have that level of conversation, and you have to trust their judgment that they're not going to share that information publicly. Not because they're worried about being sued, because they're sensible enough to understand that's confidential information. And if you don't have that level of trust, it doesn't matter what documents you've got signed. A disclosure agreement means everybody understands we're going to talk about the work that we're doing, actually because you want me to. Because without kind of blowing my own trumpet, if I talk about you on Facebook, lots of people will look at your product. I can promise you that. They'll go to your website and
But it would
connect
probably
with you
be
and stuff.
precise about what you could talk about?
No, we understand it.
Wow.
We understand each other.
You're a professional advisor, so you would be discreet when you need.
Yeah, in exactly the same way as when I was a recruiter, I didn't suddenly go out and say, this guy's looking for a job, everyone. Do you know that? You know, I knew that you didn't share that information. So I think that's a part of it, is how you formulate those agreements. It's a lot like employees nowadays. How you formulate the agreements determines how that relationship's going to be. And we've got to have a relationship where you feel you can ring or talk to me at any time. And you feel that you can ask me to go and talk to a customer, and you feel that I can go and do this stuff. And if that's in question in the beginning, we're not going to have a good relationship. It's not going to work.
I can count on one hand the number of companies that have asked me to sign an NDA in the last 5 years, literally. And it's and I normally don't have an issue signing it because it sort of cancels itself out.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to talk about anything that is your secret. Okay, wouldn't have done it anyhow, and only if something's publicly available. Am I, you know, it's sort of like it's not really even all that relevant to what I would talk about.
It's just the way people are told to do business.
Exactly.
But all those kind of things, it's like when I said if you have people, earlier when I said if you have people with sales in their title, it dictates to the world what kind of business you are and the way in which we're going to conduct. And if we're all building social technology for a social collaborative world, then we kind of need to be, social and collaborative in ourselves before we can build products that are social and collaborative. Because the number of tech companies I talk to, even quite big ones, who just don't get it. They just don't understand. They're still in the managed environment state of mind.
Can you distinguish a little bit about platform and product?
A platform is when if you're trying to gather people and those people become the product, right? So if you think about, if you use a free platform, so if you use LinkedIn, you become the product in some way. They provide you with an environment which hopefully is useful to you. You're going to derive some value, but your data is going to be sold in some way. It's either going to be targeted advertising, market intelligence, whatever it is. If I use something free, I'm signing up either for my data being sold, or I'm giving people the opportunity to sell to me if they choose to, right? I'm giving them that permission by saying that's fine. Same way as if I go to a user event. So if I go to the Workday conference, I understand that at some point they're going to stand up in front of me and say Workday's great, and that's fine. I've signed up for that. I accept that. If I buy a ticket to go to an event, I won't accept someone standing on a platform and telling me Workday's great if I've paid to go. So I'm just using that as an example of mentality, but I understand that if I use a free product, I'm going to become the product. So a platform would be something like, you might say, we're going to run so you look at something like Stack Overflow, community of developers, they sell that community in some way. In a community way, they don't do it in a negative, it's got to be of value to the community. But that's a platform that gathers people in. So that might be lots of people are trying to provide these solutions of saying all they're trying to be is job boards in a different picture. We bring lots of people in and we share jobs with them because we've got lots of people. If you're trying to be a product, you're providing a solution to a recruitment problem on a white label basis, if you think of it like that. So that's the difference. Also, I'm interested in whether I'm looking at it as, are you looking for what market are you trying to be an enterprise player or not? Because if you're an enterprise product, the way in which you play is quite different, and who you sell to is quite different. I'd say right now, from a sales point of view, if you want to be an enterprise player, the first person you should talk to in an organisation is the person responsible for data security. Until you talk to them, that's the thing that kills most deals. Talent acquisition agree to it, data security comes along and says it's not going. So I would deal with compliance and data security before I actually talk to users of the product.
1 minute.
Yeah, that's cool.
Do you have any thoughts between customers being on your advisory board and non-customers?
I don't have customers. I don't think about customers. No. As soon as you start thinking about customers, prospects, and you organise people like that, we have collaborators. That's it, right? We're all in the same boat. So I think you get the right people. Now, users, it's important to have some kind of user group that drives product design and product development. That is useful. The only problem is if you are, lots of companies fall into what I call the faster horses syndrome, the old Henry Ford thing. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. They wouldn't have said cars because they didn't know cars existed, right? So sometimes when you talk, and the reason we have crap technology is we have crap customers because they buy stuff that isn't very good, right? That's how it works. They go out and demand the average. Sometimes, because that's what we do. And we build great stuff that nobody buys because it's great but nobody knows it, right? Or it's not ready. The best mobile phone app I ever saw was an application called Shake Your Job that was built 5 years ago. 5 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. Fantastic app, no market. So sometimes you need advisors who can actually, what are we looking for? What are the 4 things we're interested in a business? 4 things we're interested in a business is, number 1 is a viable product. And most of the products I see are not a product. They're a piece of a product. They're a piece of the solution. So you look at it and go, it's nice, people probably won't pay for it. in the end, when you get to the end, it won't be enough. They'll need to pay for it with something else. You can build your business as, I'll be a couple of minutes and I'm done. You can build your business as a startup, by the way, to be immediately sold. The guys from Bright.com, I met them 2 years ago. They told me at Sherm National that they were never going to have a paying customer. No one was ever going to give them any money for their product. They sold for 125 million. They managed to raise 20 million and used that 20 million to buy users. Dead simple. Two young guys had that plan. They said, nobody believes that this aggregator's, nobody believes that this data aggregator is going to work. So we have to get 1 million users. And once we've got 1 million users, people will believe us. And then LinkedIn paid 125 million. So they always knew that on day one. Their vision was always we build to sell, not we build to provide solution in the market. They knew where they were going. The other place you want to be looking at right now, I'd say from a strategy point of view as a startup, is are you trying to build product to sell to end users directly, or do you want to start looking at the ecosystems? More and more of these companies that have tried to take over the world, the Oracles, the Lumeses, the Cornerstones, have tried to build everything the best of. What they've built is a bunch of stuff where one bit is good and the rest of it's pretty average. And the best product is always coming from startups. Now everyone's looking towards ecosystem. And for me, as a startup advisor, I'm looking at which horse do I back. Do I build for Salesforce? Do I build for Oracle HCM? Do I build for LinkedIn, Cornerstone? And there's lots of considerations in that. So if I'm building for their ecosystem and getting there, I talked to someone the other day who's got a medium to good product but has 20,000 customers in one day because he built it for Salesforce. Right? So they released it, featured it, pushed it, and he had users straight away. So one of the, I think also you need to stop thinking about old sales models. Stop thinking about we go out and we find a customer and that's a user, because Uberize everything. There's ways of doing stuff. That might not be the right strategy. You might not sell to build. There's all kinds of factors you need to consider. The other thing I've learned is, great companies worry about their problem, not how much money they're making. It's quite simple. If you have the best product, you make the most money. It seems quite straightforward. So we talk about how do we fix the problem. Thanks, everybody.